Webinar entitled Data is the Pot of Gold. Our speaker for the presentation today is Adam Higgins. My name is Jeff Baker, and I will be your moderator for today's seminar. Today's presentation will last approximately 60 minutes and include a specific question and answer period at the end of the session. You can ask questions via the web conference system simply by typing your question into the Q&A pod on the right-hand side of your screen and then clicking the call-out button or hitting enter on your keypad. These instructions will be repeated later in the program. If you have any technical questions during the event, please email support@highroadsolution.com. Today's webinar is being recorded, and all participant lines will be muted during the live program. For over a decade, Adam has functioned as the marketing and business analyst for nonprofits and associations. In 2013, Adam joined HighRoad Solution as a technical project manager to manage e-marketing and digital communication implementations. Throughout Adam's career, he has bridged the gap between the business units and information technology department. Adam is a graduate from California State University, Dominguez Hills. He's a Los Angeles native that now resides in Atlanta with his wife and son. Adam is one of the few men that does enjoy wearing a suit and tie to work. And with that, I would now like to turn the floor over to Adam.
Thanks, Jeff. And thanks for everybody for attending today's webinar. And so today we're talking data, and data is one of my favorite subjects. It's how I started my career, and I'm always intrigued by the way people can use data in powerful ways. And today we're talking about finding those gems inside your AMS or CRM to craft some really well done marketing campaigns. And data is the pot of gold to marketers. And I first realized how important data was when I was very young. And I was 12, and don't laugh, I was really 12. I went to my aunt's job. She worked at Oracle, and Oracle had this huge office building right next to the LAX airport, and I was mesmerized by the office, and I said to my aunt, I was like, what do you do? And she says, I sell databases. And I was like, what's a database? And she's like, a computer program that holds data. And I thought to myself, I was like, wow, there must be some valuable information in these databases to build this big building. And ironically, 7 years later, I'm running analysis out of Oracle databases. So that was in '92, and so people then were thinking how important databases were to their companies, and now it's more important, right? 2014, it's even more important. And today, data runs our lives because people have found practical applications to use the data to help automate or deliver useful information, and so thus, we kind of consume more and more of the data. And for associations and nonprofits, there's several ways where we can effectively use data. You can deliver really personalized member experiences on the web with custom blog posts correlated to member preferences. You can hyper-personalize emails with a taxonomy that correlates to member preferences and segmentation within the email campaign solution. You can geo-target marketing for events and have high-value publications with meaningful content to your constituents. You can craft custom social media campaigns. You can transform, advocacy efforts into real strong movements in your organization. You want to be able to, issue an alert to your members and have them act on that alert immediately. There's some things that are pending on the Hill all the time, and so you want to say, hey, members, we need you to do this, and you want them to go and do it. And so that all plays into a strategy and using data effectively to market to your constituents. And this is kind of the end result, right? This is where we want to get to. All these things require some level of strategy, right? And strategy is going to be kind of that key ingredient, if you will, to kind of make these things happen. And data helps formulate these strategies, but also helps execute the strategy as well. So with all my talks and with all my webinars, I always want to take a step back and look at marketing efforts from a high level first. And I want to kind of present from a bird's eye view first, right? And so that way you can kind of see the big picture. And then we'll kind of work our way down into the granular details. And so how I define marketing is creating a specific message for a specific audience to kind of dictate a specific response. Now, Now, I've defined this in my last couple of webinars, and last we kind of talked about, crafting the message for the audience, and we also talked about using results to kind of fuel the message for continuous improvement in your content marketing strategy. Now we're kind of, talking about the other side of the equation, the specific audience or the data. And I look at this definition kind of like a triangle, right? So all the sides are kind of working together to create the triangle. So the message and the data or the target audience work together to create what's hopefully your desired results. So the definition at its core is a really simple one, right? Creating a specific message for a specific audience to dictate a specific response. But as you know, as marketers, it's very difficult to do all three things very well. And so that's why we're here. That's why everyone's on the webinar. That's why we created, the HighRoad U. And this is why we're here, to help marketers generate better marketing results. So when you have better results and when you're doing things well, you increase a lot of things within your organization or your association. And it all kind of depends on what your organizational goals are, but whether they're, better membership relationships, higher content consumption, increasing engagement, or increasing meeting attendance, or the focus is more on the revenue side with memberships and products, or increasing, the advocacy efforts. But these are all typical goals that organizations have, and the idea is to kind of align your marketing strategy with these goals and use these objectives to kind of test your campaigns. When you're working with, that marketing triangle, right, and you're constantly like analyzing your results and defining your audience and fine-tuning that marketing copy, that generates better results. And in the end, you're closer to, your organizational goals. But on the flip side of that is what happens sometimes, and I can attest to this, and I'm guilty of it as well, is that, you get wrapped up in the minutia of the day-to-day and become very task-oriented. A project comes through, and it's just a check off the list, right? I'll give you guys an example. Let's say an executive comes to you, and they say, you know what, Adam, PAC donations are down this quarter, right? And let's send out an email. Let's just remind people to donate to the PAC. And this email needs to go out tomorrow morning. And so me, being task-oriented, I'm going to just knock this thing out, right? I'm going to go and copy and paste the email into Blue Hornet, select the, the all-member segment, hit send, boom, I'm done, right? And so sometimes it's kind of really hard to push back. And I could have said to that executive, it was like, once he said PAC donations down, I could have said, hey, executive, why are PAC donations down? Let's kind of look at that and analyze why they're down, number one, and let's kind of peruse through the database and kind of find those gems that maybe suggest some potential people that we can reach out to and market to and, hopefully, boost, PAC donations for the next quarter. And so that small conversation that I had with the executive is really a target market strategy. Analyzing the database, finding the target markets, doing the market research, all that plays into the target market strategy. And so rather than a check off the list, the PAC donation project could be a really cool project to work, and this cool project with a little strategy could actually increase the revenue. So my market strategy is really only 6 steps. And the first is defining a problem. So you want to define what the problem is. You want to, 2, define the objective. You want to do some research, number 3. 4, define the audience. 5, craft a message. And 6, then analyze your campaign. And so we'll break each of these areas down right now. So defining the problem. When starting a project, you want to define the problem first. What are you trying to resolve? And in the previous example, it's the PAC donations are low this quarter, right? How do we know that? There's probably a report or a dashboard that illustrates PAC contributions for each quarter. We see last quarter's donations are low. The executive's coming to you because he or she has an annual goal to be at a specific spot, and based on the trends, it looks like he's not going to hit that, or he or she is not going to hit that goal. So we have a problem here. PAC donations or low the score. So what's our objective? Our objective is to increase PAC donations, but let's kind of use the SMART technique to guideline our objectives to make sure that it's specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-related. So increasing PAC revenue, right? So that's not really specific, right? So let's be a little more specific with that piece, okay? So looking at the trend data, we need to increase PAC revenue this quarter by, let's say, 5% to meet our annual goal. So that gets a little bit more specific than just saying increase PAC donations. Now the goal is a little bit more measurable in a sense because there's a quantitative number attached to it. It's also actionable because it will improve. We're trying to increase the PAC donation and the revenue. And it's obviously relevant to the organization because these dollars are for, the constituents, our constituents, and it facilitates, advocacy efforts on the Hill. And lastly, we need to timestamp this, right? So increase PAC donations by 5% in the second quarter allows us to put a timestamp on our objective, our goal, to see if we fail or succeed. So now we have our objective set. We know our problem. So let's dig into the database, whether it be Query Central, Data Analyzer, or Views, and look at past donors and research their demographic and geographics and find others that haven't donated that have similar criteria to the people that are donors, right? Find commonalities amongst donors. And so the initial idea that came across my table, that came from that executive, was we're going to send this via email, but is email the appropriate channel to communicate, right? So looking at the donors, I might look at what channel is best to communicate this message. Now, there's other ways to communicate a message. There's social media, there's SMS text messages, there's live events, there's webinars. So I'm going to take a look at open rates of the donors. I'm going to take a look at click rates for the donors and see, if they're actively engaged into my emails, and run some comparisons. See if if these donors are likely to open email rather than attend a webinar. And so this will kind of dictate the channel that we choose. So for this sake of, this webinar and this example, from our research, we find that C-level members tend to donate more, and we find that they read our emails. They're actively engaged in our emails. So let's collect all of the CEOs that haven't donated. We'll put them into a segment into our email campaign software. And this is now going to be our target audience. We are going to target CEOs via email and send them a series of emails via our campaign solution. And so the next step is really just crafting that message, right, and using some of those email marketing best practices to develop a beautiful crafted message for email, and that can include, responsive design, clear call to action, creative copy, great imagery that kind of invokes emotion so that they would donate. But all these things are included, and the key thing here is making sure that you match the email copy and you match the graphics to the specific audience, right? So you're matching your message to the CEO. So all of this message is centered around the CEO. So when they get it, they understand it, right? And so the last step is really we send out our messages, and now it's a matter of just analyzing those messages. And now it's at the end of the quarter, and we can see, if the series of emails, did generate some more, donations for the PAC. And this is a big difference than the spray and pray method that we kind of were avoiding, right? With the little strategy, we're using data to tie into our organizational efforts, right, and really affect, change within the PAC revenue. Now, before we can even execute something like this, we have to take a look at our data, right? Before we can execute a campaign like the PAC donation, we have to have the data in an easy output format, right? If certain things aren't in place, we wouldn't be able to aggregate the CEO data in a meaningful way, right? If CEO was in the database as CEO or Chief Executive Officer, then it would be very difficult for me to run that segmentation. So let's break down the data, and I look at data as two distinct parts, input and output. And both are important to achieving a successful marketing campaign. Both are easily a struggle, input and output. And like the target marketing is equal to messaging, data input is equally congruent to data output. And so when I'm talking data input, I'm referring to that data entry aspect and really protecting the validity of the data. So if the input is clean, the output is going to be clean and easily attainable for the marketers to target market, to create analytics, and do some of those, robust programs. So data entry is a critical role, and a lot of organizations struggle with data hygiene, and whether duplicate customers or whether it's bad emails, whether it's bad addresses, whether it's the wrong phone numbers, the list goes on and on. And so no one is intentionally saying, none of the data entry staff is saying, I want to put erroneous data into the records, into the database records. Sometimes it's just a mere fact that there's so many sources to information that, erroneous data gets in there. There's, data rapidly changes. Think about how quickly people change their cell phone number or quickly change their personal email address or their jobs for that matter. And so as marketers, we want to trust that data, all right? And that bad data kind of equates to, data distrust, which kind of kills the vibe and the momentum of our campaigns and makes the campaigns more laborious than they really need to be. So what we need to do is kind of get our databases in shape in order to effectively market, right? It's almost like a fitness program. We got to kind of eat right and train so that we can run that triathlon. And so you can kind of look at me today as your personal trainer, and so we're going to spend some time talking about how we can get your databases to kind of run these triathlons. But first, you gotta standardize your data, right? You gotta standardize your data entry methods and how staff specifically enters the data into the AMS. I typically call these business rules, and business rules kind of spell out how to format the data so that your staff knows exactly how to input the data. Business rules are posted for every data entry staff. It's on an intranet site. Everybody knows how to do the data entry, and the whole organization is on the same page when it comes to inputting and formatting the data that goes into the database. It also kind of means, too, that we're establishing some controls on the user interface so that, sometimes the staff doesn't have to think about what format it needs to go in, right? So from an IT perspective, we're placing controls on the user interface that prevent them from entering in erroneous data. And so this really just gives, marketers clean data to kind of export and aggregate. When the data is entered in various formats, for me, it just becomes frustrating and just a long, laborious process. And so for most data analysts, we kind of inherit the data, right? We rarely get a chance to kind of start from the beginning to establish business rules and so forth. And so a lot of these business rules come from hindsight and looking at data and past mistakes. But in all databases, whether it's a new one or an existing one, I've always had to dedupe customer data. It just happens. And so I'll give you a few examples of how we can tackle that a little later, but deduping is, one of the ways to get your databases in shape. And data entry can only take you kind of so far, right? So there's changes happening all the time with data. So using a CMS, an integration with your CMS, maybe with your email campaign solution or your webinar solution, or you might have some type of single sign-on solution, you integrating that to help keep up the hygiene of your database. And so, for example, with our email campaign solution, we can send back, to the AMS that an email address is bad, right? And so that way, a staff member can, follow up on that bad email and go correct it. And usually, too, a bad email, especially if you're dealing with people that have work email addresses, typically that lends itself to saying that that person has changed their job. So now that leads to more exploratory data and more analysis that can go back and more market intelligence that can go back into your database. And there's also like address validation software that can kind of help standardize things as well, and clean and correct bad addresses and make sure all the states and the cities are all formatted the exact way. So when it comes to entering data in, there's really two methods. I see it, there's two ways that data gets inputted into the system. And there's no right or wrong way, it's just what fits your organization. But understanding how the data is inserted will kind of help you understand the pitfalls and prevent some of the bad data conundrums that most of us face. So if you understand how it's getting in, you can kind of prevent some things from happening. So the centralized method is when there's just one department is kind of responsible for entering data. Maybe it's like a call center and it's 5 or 6 reps, and those are the only people that do data entry, and they're just entering data in for the entire organization. There's also the decentralized method where everyone in the organization has rights to enter data in each department. So publications or membership or marketing all have rights to enter data, and each is responsible kind of for entering their own data. And let's kind of break down some of the pros and cons of each. The decentralized method is kind of not controlled, right? So you run into some data hygiene problems. But you do get better market intelligence when it's kind of decentralized, right? Because what happens is you have subject matter experts entering in the data, and so you're gathering that market intelligence that otherwise might get lost if it was just entered in by, a group of 4 or 5 people. And what I do find is that the data gets entered in quickly because it's spread out across the entire organization and it's not focused on a core group of people. And then what it does too is also becomes an organizational software program, right? It's not, just one department's program, it becomes the organization program. This database, this AMS is, our program. With the centralized method, it's well controlled, right? And I've been at a company where we only have 4 or 5 people that can enter it in data, and the data was really clean because we had, 4 or 5 people that are all on the same page. They all had the same business rule, and it was easy to track down and fix mistakes. But, a lot of organizations really can't afford a full, full-time staff of a few people that kind of are just dedicated to data entry. But from my experience, it's always the ratio of staff to the amount of data that needs to get entered is always lopsided in the data's favor. And there's always, it seems like there's a data entry backlog. You're kind of waiting for this to get inputted so that you can run this report. And so in the centralized method, the con there is kind of, you'll have a little bit of backlog and you're just waiting for data to get in so that you can run some analysis or some reports. And so here's some types of formatting issues that can happen, right? This is where data goes bad, right? In that previous example, when I was talking about, aggregating all the CEOs or the C-level staff to do the PAC campaign, it would have been very difficult if I had various versions of CEO, if I had, periods in between CEO. That would have been really laborious to kind of, aggregate all that content. And so if I have some protocols in place to prevent, CEO from chief executive officer or California versus CA, or the different versions of vice president, or the different versions of companies and the address and so forth, it just makes, my life easier, or the data analyst life easier. And at times, I've been that, bad data cop, right? So I got audit reports and I'm saying, hey man, can you make sure that you enter? So you have audit reports that are kind of checking these things out to make sure data is entered in correctly. And you can also do this from a program perspective to kind of look at and test to make, if and then statements to, throw red flags to your data entry people to kind of, say, hey, you need to spell out CEO. And keep in mind also, you have to have some protocols in place as well for web interfaces. A lot of people have integrations that are tied to their AMS with their web applications, and so you're allowing your own members to update their information, which is great, right? Because that's like real-time data, right? You don't have to wait for anybody to enter that in. But what you're going to run into sometimes is that they're not going to know your protocols, your business rules, so you have to establish web platforms to include some of your business rules so that you generate errors for them so that they're entering in data correctly as well. And like I said, I haven't been inside a database that hasn't had duplicates. They're there. They're always going to be there. There's some prevention methods. I've had systems that had, sophisticated algorithms to kind of detect possible duplicates. Some of them come base, some of them were add-ons. Just make sure those systems are kind of tweaked and kind of perfected to your environment so that the thresholds for your data entry people can be alerted, so when a possible duplicate arrives, they can say, oh, and make that decision on whether or not it's a duplicate. And develop those, audit reports, right? So to kind of check what's entered in over the week and kind of review it to see, what data is erroneous, and you can kind of fix it right on the spot. Because what happens sometimes is that you'll have, you let this go for 2 or 3 months, and now it becomes a project, right? And now it becomes a week project to clean out the duplicate. So what you want to do is kind of work this continuously. You see a dupe, you fix it, you merge the duplicate into one account. So for most of you, if you haven't, really looked at your duplicates over a long period of time, there's definitely a significant amount of cleanup that you would have to do, and that can be a big project. And I've been a part of those projects. So there's some Excel tips. If this is kind of raw and dirty, you dump the data into Excel and figure out which duplicates you want to merge together. Sometimes it requires concatenating, a couple fields together so that you can sort and find the duplicates. If you have a one-to-one match, right? So if Adam Higgins is in a row twice, this count if function in Excel works very well. So we'll find the duplicate within a range of rows in Excel. So you just put this function in the column and you copy it down, and then it will produce all the duplicates that are within the system. And then the lookup tool is probably my favorite Excel function, which allows you to kind of add additional sheets within the Excel workbook and then relate different values to each other. So it's almost like creating a mini database within Excel with using that lookup function, because you can find unique identifiers and link unique identifiers together to see related fields from 2 different sheets. So these are 3 of the functions that I've used throughout my career to kind of look through duplicates and do data analysis to kind of figure out which duplicates are there, and then I go into the system and kind of merge them together. Here's a kind of innovative way to kind of deal with duplicates, right? So let's say after we did all of our analysis, now we have the duplicates merged together, and maybe we have 3 email addresses for this one particular person, this person being me, Adam Higgins. But what we can do is we can kind of segment these duplicates. We flag them in our system. We create a segment for them in our email campaign solution. And now let's target them, right? Because once we merge the two records or three records together, we really don't know which is the preferred email that this constituent, this member, wants to use. So we can send out a campaign to these, people with duplicates, and then on their email preference center, we can, change that input box to be a selection box and allow them to select which preferred method of communication they want. And so this is a really creative and innovative way to kind of, treat duplicates and figure out what communication methods they would prefer via a email preference center, the EPC. And so let's get into some of the fun stuff now, right? So we kind of, went through our workout. We now, are eating right. We've done all the exercises that we need. We're in super good shape. Now it's time to run some triathlons, some marathons, maybe a couple mud runs, whatever floats your boat. But the data output is probably the fun part, right? The other part is kind of laborious and tedious with, cleaning up the database. And so these are the different things that you can do once you have that good, clean data, right? You can do really good email segmentation and target marketing. You can personalize your email campaigns really well down to the granular level. Take the ASAE newsletter, for example, which is using taxonomies to personalize your emails. That takes some strategy, that takes some cleanup of the data. And so all these different data outputs is all the reflection of cleaning up your data and making good use of your data. And we got market research, good market intelligence, reporting metrics, and dashboards are really good for, director and executive and C-levels to kind of see an overview of, your progress in terms of your email campaigns or different initiatives that you have going on in your organization. But in order to have an effective dashboard, you have to have, clean data. And so what I'm going to spend, a few minutes on is going through an example of how we could, use some good data from our AMSs. And the hot topic right now is really, this engagement score, right? A lot of the AMSs are pushing this and incorporating this kind of metric within their database. And if you don't know, so the engagement score pretty much aggregates member activity into one value, okay? So each member gets a score based upon certain activities that they do within your organization, and you dictate what those activities are. So if they purchase a book, or they purchase some type of publication, or if they read your email, you associate a value to those activities, and then that value gets aggregated, and that specific customer gets a score. And what this allows you to do is really compare your membership on a scale to see who is highly engaged into your organization. Excuse me. And what it's good for, it's really a good indicator of future behavior, because you can do some really good analysis and say people with this type of score are most likely to do A, B, and C. And so that type of analysis is really difficult to do outside the engagement score. So it becomes a real powerful tool for target marketing, because now you can target your different segments based on how active they are within your organization. So what you're going to do with the score is you're going to put it on a bell curve, right? You take that score and you see where people fall on this bell curve. Now the bell curve is kind of really synonymous with stats, and it's this right here. Bell curve is what you call a normal distribution, which you're putting everybody in a rank, and you're putting them in certain spots so that you see where they rank amongst everyone, right? And so I, being a highly engaged person, might have a really high number. I would be off to the far far right. If I wasn't really engaged into this association, I would be at the bottom 25%, which means that I'm off to the far left. And so what you're doing with that score is putting it on a bell curve. Now, how would you do that? For me, it's easy to do the analysis in Excel. There's some other data software programs like SPSS that allows you to do this really easy and actually will probably produce that actual bell curve, normal distribution graph. But in Excel, there's this function called percent rank. And percent rank allows you to see the ranking for each person on a scale, right, from 0 to 100%, okay? And so now you're seeing where this constituent lies on the bell curve. And all you have to do is put in percent rank, put in the range of the data, and then plug in the constituent score, and then you copy that down in Excel, and now you have your pretty much your distribution amongst your organization in Excel, and now you can run some analysis. And so with data analysis, typically, traditionally what you're doing is trying to find the normal, but and that's good. You want to find what's normal, right? But also what I like to do is mark it to the extremes, right? The top 25 and the bottom 25. And the reason being because the top 25 is those that are really engaged into your content, and the other 25 are people that are not engaged. So the not engaged, you really want to understand why they're not engaged so that you can help your marketing efforts in the future, or find out better channels to communicate to them to get them into the gray area, right? And so the whole process is trying to move people along this bell curve and getting grays into the gray people into the top 25 and the bottom 25 into the gray, so that you're kind of continuously improving and building up your engagement. And so here's some examples of what we can do with the highly engaged. You want to find the channels that they communicate, because let's say if you have 10,000 members, right, and that top 25%, that's what, 2,500, and so let's say of that 2,500, who are on social media, right, who use social media heavily. If you find those, now you have a good group of social media advocates that can help promote your brand and help further some of your messaging, right? So once you send out a message, you know automatically that this group of people are going to share it with their friends on Facebook, or share it on Twitter, or retweet it on Twitter, or like it on LinkedIn. All those different things, you want to incorporate those highly engaged so that you can further your brand, and then reward them for the loyalty. There's in our email campaign solution, there's a kind of a drip campaign where you put people through a funnel, and if they do certain activities, they get rewarded. And so if they see that, then that gets them to continuously do the things that you're trying to get them to do. And keep in mind that triangle again is that message and that audience, and to produce results, and the results is to kind of share your message amongst everyone. And so there's also a really cool thing you can do with the highly engaged as well, is start to geo-target, right? So imagine when we're talking about 2,500 people, right, that were highly engaged into your organization. A simple test is to see if they're if there's a big group of them in one area. That's immediately that they're going to attend that meeting. So what's cool about that is that you can start to have these other forms of meetings, and maybe it's a monthly meeting with these group of people, but now you are facilitating another level of engagement with geo-targeting and finding the highly engaged. And here's some ideas on with doing programs for people that are disengaged, right? And so I tend to survey the disengaged. You know, you may have to use analog methods in this scenario, depending on the breakdown and demographic of your association. But you know, funny story was, I've always been kind of, a guy that's all digital, right? No paper. And there was the membership guy was like, I think we need to fax them. And I was like, no, we're not going to do fax. And we ended up faxing these set of members, and like half of them responded. And I was like, wow. So don't disregard other methods of other channels, because some analog methods, we say we're digital marketers and doing email and social and so forth, but sometimes fax might get it done. And then so once you collect that data, you're going to find out how you can engage them. And obviously we were using the wrong channel to engage this set of members. And so don't disregard, analog methods of communication. And kind of the last topic I want to kind of touch on here before we kind of go into some questions, and I kind of, went through this, and there's a lot of detail here, so I know we got some questions going to come through, but whose role is to kind of do these things, this, data cleanup? Is that IT's function? Is that marketing's function? Doing the data analysis, is that a marketing thing? Is that an IT thing? I've seen, and over my career, I've always been in marketing. I've always been that IT guy inside the marketing department. And so there was always a overlap into the IT world. Sometimes the circle kind of almost completely overlapped, but you're seeing a trend now with a lot of organizations, and I just had a chat with this guy at Coca-Cola down here in Atlanta, and it's a real position. It's, they're hiring, chief, marketing technologists. And so these people are, really defining the technology from a marketing perspective, because the marketing world is becoming more and more technical. And so, that's something, to consider, folks. A lot of the for-profits are doing this in terms of hiring marketing technologists. And so what it does do is it does alleviate some of, the stress on IT, having that IT person in marketing, and it also alleviates some of the stress within the marketing department as well, because now they're not, hitting, information technology, the IT department up consistently and saying, hey, can you do A, B, and C? And they're kind of waiting on it. You got a kind of a dedicated guy within your department that kind of understands the business logic and the business itself to kind of execute on some of the IT functions. So that's something to consider, folks. And Jeff, I think that's it. If we got any questions that we can start fielding, let's go ahead and shoot.
All right, great. Thanks, Adam. It is now time for the Q&A segment of our training, and your participation is key for the success of this webinar, so please don't be afraid to ask any questions. Again, you can ask a question via the web conference system by typing it into the Q&A pod in the lower right-hand side of your screen, and then clicking the call-out button or hitting enter on your keyboard. All right, our first question. In regards to the duplicates, how do we set up algorithms in our AMS to give the messages to those trying to input the data?
Yeah, there's some software programs out there that kind of do it for you. There's, I know data.com has a cleaning tool and a duplication algorithm. There's some AMSs that already have it based within. I know Personify very well, and they have one in there, and you can actually specify what parameters dictates as a duplicate. So take a look at those, and then there might be something that you can build within your own IT department, and take a look at some of the data entry inputs or fields that you're entering in, and figuring out which ones are seeing that are constantly duplicated and work an algorithm around that.
Okay, great. So kind of start with the fields where you're seeing most of the errors and work from there.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly.
Excellent. All right, our next question. What do we need to do to start geo-targeting? Kind of what data is needed, and then what would the next steps be?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? So first off, you need to get your address data clean. There's some software packages out there that allow you to do the longitude and latitude um, out of the box. So it basically looks at the address and gives you back a longitude and latitude, and it works really well with actually placing it on a graph. So if you want to put, let's say, dots on a Google chart or something like that, that metric work, or that longitude and latitude field works very well for that. So there's software packages out there that kind of convert address data into longitude and latitude values, and some of the AMSs actually have those add-on integrations. They already have like a vendor that specifically works with that AMS to do those conversions, but also, making sure that your data is clean, and you can simply do some simple analysis, right? Like city, state, and zip code radius. And so within our email campaign platform, we can actually do a zip code radius, right? So if the zip code, you punch in that zip code, you can say, hey, give me all of the CEOs within, a 20-mile radius, and now you have a good target of people to reach out to for a specific meeting.
All right, great. That's actually all the questions we have right now. Adam, if you want to do a quick wrap-up, feel free, participants, to still type in your questions, but Adam, go ahead and do a wrap-up, and then we will close it out.
Yeah, so really today was really talking about effective ways to use data, and you have to have a strategy in place to kind of not do that spray and pray method, right? We kind of close our eyes and hope that the campaign is going to do what it's supposed to do, but really defining that problem, really looking at the objectives and doing research within your database, and then define that audience and craft messages. Remember that triangle, right? So you want that message to match your audience, and then continuously analyze your results. And so if you follow those kind of 6 simple steps, your campaigns will get better and better over time, and then making sure your database is clean before you can actually kind of do some of these strategic things with your marketing campaigns. And then, once you get to that point where you can kind of run those, database triathlons, you'll begin to see, all your hard work kind of pay off.
All right, great. Thank you for your participation in today's webinar, Data is the Pot of Gold. A special thank you to our speaker, Adam Higgins. Please take a moment and provide us some feedback by using the survey link in the important information box in the top right-hand corner. You may also email us at support@highroadsolution.com. Today's session was recorded. You will receive an email within the next few days with a link to the webinar recording, as well as written answers to any of the questions we were unable to get to today. Today's webinar is copyrighted by HighRoad Solution with all rights reserved. This concludes today's program. Thank you.